This is Coraline, one of my favorite films ever. My past attempts at cracking out the secrets of this movie have been good, but not great. I managed to dig out lots of excellent evidence to support 3 different theories, but came to a final conclusion that was half-baked. So, as promised, I'm returning today to give my new take on this after rewatching it multiple times in a row with an open mind. This was supposed to be my 150th theory uploaded on Halloween Day, but my eagerness got the better of me. It was going to be number 150 because the Pink Palace apartments are 150 years old. Anyways, here's a quick recap if you don't remember my last 3 theories. In part 1, I used what YB said about seeing a sky full of stars and looking at parallel images deduced that the other world had a major portal at the bottom of the well, and even that the other world itself may be somewhere far down there. In part 2, I noted a ton of cool Easter eggs and secrets about the film, and then used them as prime evidence to support my 3rd theory, where I created a legitimate timeline of events at the Pink Palace. I also made an attempt to work certain ideas into it, but those got a bit unbelievable, so that video is mainly good for its timeline. And today, I'm looking at several things. With the help of commenters, the Coraline Wiki, and the general internet, I'm looking at the Beldam's existence, the cat's existence, the town's existence, and why the Beldam does what she does. Let's get into this. People have always believed that the Beldam was a strange creature with an unknown background. She needed to eat kids' flesh for her nutrition or she'd die, but that simply isn't true. And no, I'm not claiming that my old theory is correct either. Of all the helpful comments I've received, one in particular stood out to me as a strikingly good idea. That the Beldam actually lived in the Pink Palace. But then something clicked. And as I did some research, sure enough, history itself supported my thoughts. Coraline has been confirmed to take place in Ashland, Oregon. Ashland was settled in 1852, roughly 150 years ago. This means that the Pink Palace was built as the town was being settled, and whoever lived there first was a very old-fashioned person, the Beldam. Now, that word means a lot of things, like beautiful lady and grand dame, but the thing is, it's a very old word, rarely ever used, and I'm suggesting that the Beldam is the original owner of the house. But her name isn't actually the Beldam. But she was a normal woman. She had the Pink Palace built for her, as she and several others settled Ashland. This explains why there's a garden in the backyard that resembles her face strikingly. She is the Grand Dame, or the leader of the settlers, and thus she gets the mansion of Ashland with a garden built in her honor. If you're still touchy about the topic of her being a human, the Coraline book literally confirms this when the Beldam says she had a mother. She said she stuck her mother in a grave and pushed her back in whenever she tried climbing out. Well, weird. Okay, so far so good. A highly respected woman settled Ashland and moved into a large pink mansion. The book implies that the Beldam discovered the Otherworld and that she didn't actually invent the Otherworld itself, just the stuff in it. So it's my believing that she perhaps fell down the well one day. At the bottom of this well, the Otherworld. It's sort of a pocket universe without any laws of physics, as all of the laws are created by the inhabitants, the prime one being the Beldam. So basically, her magic isn't natural, it's just a know-how of the Otherworld's emptiness. Now here's where it gets interesting. I'm sure you've seen Tangled, right? It's like a Disney Rapunzel movie. In it, there is a woman named Mother Gothel. She's a very old woman who feeds off of a magical flower to stay young forever. This is exactly what the Beldam is doing. Eyes are the window to the soul, and she lures lively children into her world and takes their eyes. And because of her void's rules, this takes their souls, therefore giving the Otherworld the magic required for the Beldam to survive for the 150 years that she has. Okay, I'm glad I kinda cleared that up. But if this is the case, where does the cat fit into all of this? The cat is a very important supporting character who has extensive knowledge about the Otherworld. In my other theory, I just dismissed him as being curious and that he knows where the jumping mice portals are. But rewatching the film, I have another idea. The 2 crazy women downstairs give Coraline taffy. As Miss Forcible grabs a taffy dish, dates are shown beneath 3 different taffy bowls. I must remind you that these are the ladies who give Coraline psychic tea leaves and a savior triangle, so these dates must also be important. and after looking throughout the film a bit, I discovered that these dates match up with the years new people move into the Pink Palace. The grandmother's sister would have been taken in approximately 1960, the young boy in 1936, and the pioneer girl in 1921. And if the Beldam has been out for her magical youth since 1852, one date in this pattern seems to be missing. The 1 year required for the Beldam to live is somewhere around the year 1900, and this is where the cat ties in. My assumption is that the cat was that child, but the Beldam did not succeed in taking his soul. She didn't have a way of trapping him, and it resulted in him escaping. Of course, he'd then grow old, eventually dying after 1960, and he'd be reincarnated around 30 years later to protect Wybie Lovat. This is why we see him so close to Wybie all the time. He's protecting him from the Beldam. The Beldam's skeleton-like state means that there was a period where she was desperate for magic. This caused her to have to replace various body parts that were decomposing. She gives herself multiple legs for optimum maneuverability. This would have been the period where the boy had escaped and left her to possibly die. We know that in the book, the Beldam is after magic, not food, as she even kidnapped a fairy. So my theory is still pretty fitting. The Grand Dame of Ashland settles into the largest mansion in town, even having a garden created in her honor. She gets trapped down a well, which happens to portal to a pocket universe where she can create her own laws. Her inability to escape gets dire, and she begins to lose life in her pocket universe. The house being abandoned, a 1900s family moves in, and their boy is taken advantage of by the Beldam, who needed magic to survive. So she opened a portal of easier accessibility right there in the house, the door. The Beldam's mistake, however, was that she didn't create a doll, and her unprepared plan allowed the boy to escape. He grew up, died, and decades later was born to save Wybie. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and answer a bunch of common questions. Question 1 is about the room in the first scene of the film, the sewing room. If you're one of those people who doesn't know where it is, I believe it's just the study. The room's decagonal shape identically parallels that of the study. Its wallpaper is also similar to the study, proving that the sewing room is indeed, well, just the study. And that means that the window she throws the doll out of is the small door. I mean, it's the exact same size. Although, as a very clever commenter stated, the doll's floating nature could be it rising through the water in the well, as the well is likely a portal. Question 2 is, why does she use buttons as eyes? My theory on why she uses buttons is because they're easily sewable, and she can see through the button eyes of anything she sews them on. It's just little things that this film does to show this. Watch this transition on the first night.
See you soon.
See? The Beldam faded into the doll, signifying that she sees through anything with button eyes. Question 3 is, why do the other world's inhabitants have free will? It's because she's using the soul sand of the kids to power their lives, and the souls know the truth. Question 4 is, how does that triangle thingy work? The triangle is a cool object given to Coraline by Miss Spink and Forcible, and it allows her to see the other world for what it actually is. A threaded creation by the Beldam. This triangle isn't magic, it's just an object from the real world, and looking through it shows things in the real world, such as the souls. Question 5 is, how does the doll really work? Something small I noticed is that Coraline goes into town with her mother and doesn't have the doll with her. She asks for gloves, doesn't get them, and goes home. She starves for food at home. The doll is seen nowhere nearby. Coraline then goes to the other world, and the Beldam has all the food Coraline wanted and a cool outfit, replacing the gloves she wanted. If the doll was nowhere to be seen with Coraline, how did the Beldam know to make her these things? Speaking of the parents, have you ever stopped to consider how the real mom and dad actually got trapped in the other world? What? The Beldam made a doll of them. Big deal. But then she took them? How on earth could that happen? And this prompts the question, were her parents really taken? We hear,
Coraline, we're home!
And they close the front door. So, is it just a trick by the Beldam? I mean, do you honestly think the parents are gonna act like this? But the big thing here is the snow on their clothes, which instantaneously melts. It's a question I'd like you guys to ponder and comment what you think as for just exactly what the doll really does, and if the parents were really taken. I mean, this is the movie that goes so far as to get the area code of Portland, Oregon correct on the back of a moving truck, so all Easter eggs have full meaning. Question 6 is, what are all those toys doing in the passage? They're all over it, and you can't just say it's from kids dropping their toys in there, as they're on the ceiling too. I believe it's the Beldam's mice slaves bringing her objects to altar. The mice are another part of my theory I need to address. They know everything about the other world and can speak to Bobinski somehow. The other mother uses mice as they can maneuver worlds easily and go through small portals like the ones the cat goes through. Also, they're good servants, as the littler amount of soul sand put in an object, the littler they will obey the soul, and the more they will obey the Beldam. And while on the topic of mice bringing objects for her to alter, why can't she create from scratch? This is a surprisingly common question, and the answer is, it's a void. She can't create things in a void. She needs things to be brought into it, things she can apply the non-physical rules to. Question 7 isn't really a question so much as an Easter egg. Research nobody has ever done. The ghosts in Coraline's dream are in a place where the backdrop is Starry Night, a painting by Van Gogh. Starry Night is believed to be a representation of isolation, and Van Gogh himself called it a starlit vault of heaven one can only call God. Now, I'm not too familiar with the Bible, but according to historical research people have done on this painting, the 11 stars represents Genesis 37:9, a verse that had to do with Joseph. And historians believe that Van Gogh identified Joseph with his art because, unlike Joseph, he was a dreamer and had just underwent years of imprisonment. Sound insanely familiar? Oh, the symbolism! Question 8 isn't a question, but a statement. I believe I might have already said this, but Coraline basically taking the souls demagifies the environment. Taking the power of the world destroys it, and everything, including the moon, is moving because of Coraline's meddling. Notice how the button on the moon stops for a split second when Coraline doesn't grab the last soul. There is still magic. It's not the Beldam moving the button onto the moon, it's the magic just going away. Question 9 is, can the Beldam predict the future? Wybie said he found the doll in his grandma's trunk, meaning the intro scene takes place 50 years before the rest of the movie, when the Beldam remade the doll. So if she made Coraline, can the Beldam predict the future? I really honestly don't know. What's your guys' take on the Beldam's future predictability? Question 10 is, if the other mother is so omnipotent, why doesn't she just kill all the kids? Because she needs their love, and because when they're loving, they have very potent souls for the utmost magic to save her world, and leaving the other world would kill her instantly. Her hand can go as it's bit like a robot. And question 11 is perhaps the biggest question of all. Why is there only one key? Why does the Beldam fail to replicate it? And if it's been confirmed that this world was discovered, not created, then why does the key have a button on it? Take to the comments. I honestly can't answer that question. What do you think? Plot hole? The final Easter egg I discovered was that Coraline has a little dragonfly or butterfly hair clip thing in all the time. Spirit animals are animals that reflect the spirit of a person. Here it is, my final timeline. The Grand Dame of Ashland, Oregon, settles into a mansion. One day she falls down a well, portaling her into an inescapable pocket universe that demands her creation. Years later, a family moves into the Dame's house, and desperate to stay alive, the Grand Dame creates magical laws in the non-physical world, stating that its magic can keep her living. Eager to stay alive, the Grand Dame uses magic to create more portals and lure this kid into her world to take his soul magic. He escapes, she fails, and slowly deteriorating, she replaces her body parts with metallic versions of what she had, giving herself some upgrades. Years later, what's left of her is consciousness and a skeletal metal bone structure. A new family moves in. The Beldam this time is prepared and succeeds. She does it twice more, and then Coraline happens, and the Beldam supposedly dies by her first and last victims, the first victim being the reincarnated spirit to protect children nearby. Alright, so this is by far my longest theory, and I need to wrap things up. Of course, I have more questions, like why was Coraline allowed to move into a house where the grandma says kids can't move into? But all of these things are either plot holes, or just things I can't wrap my head around. Commenters, I'd like your take on these unfathomable questions. Until next time, I'm the Theorizer. Coraline Part 5. I must say, this won't be easy. Don't go and rage in the comments if it's not as good as Part 4, but basically what I've done in the past few months is rewatch this film over and over, trying to extract more and more information from it. I've noticed many new Easter eggs, secrets, and chunks of evidence to add to Part 4, and so I have lots to add to my previous theories. So without any more unnecessarily obnoxious further ado, here's what I've got. I have found a bit more evidence to support the well theory, or should I say, you guys did. Many of you told me about this, and when I searched it up for clarification, it was very accurate. There is a ring of mushrooms that surround the well, known as a fairy ring. These things are known in folklore as magical entry points, and they generally just represent magic. They also represent dangerous and hazardous places. They grow in dead areas as well. The Beldam also kidnapped a fairy in the books, so the fact that fairy rings are entirely associated with magic and entrances almost skyrocketingly confirms my theory on the well. And maybe the Beldam didn't fall down the well, maybe it was calling to her, but more on that in a minute. Now let's hop into the other world. The other mother is clearly a spider fan for reasons I'm not too sure of yet, but the point is, the other world's wallpaper is patterned spiders. But what's interesting about this is the primary wallpaper in the real world is also that same spider pattern. This fact even further proves my Grand Dame theory, as it would make sense for the same wallpaper to cover both sides of the house if she lived there to begin with. And something shocking I noticed when looking at the walls was that there's a painting in the other world of the Pink Palace. It's a very old looking painting, and the house in the picture has a blue sky, meaning it's daytime. Meaning it's the real world. Meaning the Beldam has a painting of the real world in a world where she's clearly passionate about nighttime and buttons. Meaning that she has it for a reason. Everything she creates is created in the image of the other world. So since this image isn't at nighttime, it means that she actually had this painting in the real world, which means that she did live in that house. And that strongly supports my Grand Dame theory. But if you don't believe me with that, there is another very old-fashioned painting on one of her walls. It is of an old-fashioned town with an old-fashioned car in it. Ashland, perhaps? That would make sense if she lived in Ashland like I stated in Part 4, and speaking of paintings, I don't know if this is significant or not, but when reflected in the mirror, this picture isn't the same as the one reflected. But let's move on from paintings and pictures, and let's get into portals. There were some people in Part 4's comment section that weren't believing there were other portals. In Part 4 I mentioned that there were miniature ones that the mice take, and that the cat also takes to easily get from world to world. But if you still don't believe me that he does use portals, then how does this happen? Coraline enters the door for the third time, and he watches her do so. Then, he suddenly appears in a window in the other world, and then, around the backyard, he starts talking to her. So he clearly used a portal right there. So that should remove any suspicions. Also, look at some of the Coraline title art used in movie promotions. The cat is the L, and it appears as though he's emerging from a rectangular light source, like a portal. Although that might not be the case, it's still pretty convincing. But now, let's get into my really good theories. The question on everybody's mind after Part 4 was this. Coraline sent the key down the well. Does that mean the Beldam got it? Yes, it does mean that. Almost immediately after that scene, we are introduced to the first and only grand sweep of the entire backyard, where we see the Beldam's face imprinted in the garden, almost as if she's still there and she received the key. Then we sweep out to the cat, who uses a portal, something only usable if the other mother, the one who added more portals, is still alive. And just the way that they show this shot where the cat disappears and then a dramatic thud occurs. It's kind of oddly presented. We already know that he uses portals, so what is so dramatic about this? Then you realize that the dramatic thud was to symbolize that if he can take a portal like this, then the other world is still there. So yes, the Beldam got the key. And Coraline, of course, didn't know that, and neither did the cat, as remember, he was just her first victim, and naturally, he wouldn't know about the well. But I also get asked, then why does the hand try to pull her away from the well and back to the door? To that, I say, she didn't want the well opened, she wanted the door opened. and it needs to be opened from the real side. Here's a quick thing I absolutely have to talk about. One of the only holes in my last theory was how the Beldam got her magic in the first place. You know, to initially create the doll in the world. I always was a little disappointed because it was a tiny hole with a huge impact on the analysis. But then, just as I started writing this, a commenter known as the Magical Kittens stated that their friend had figured it out. The first batch of life to start everything came from the Beldam herself. She used her own soul to literally create the world. Her button eyes can be explained by this as well. They are the window to the soul, correct? Exactly. And the reason she can't leave the world is not only because she would deteriorate due to age and no magic, but because she is now physically bound to the other world, and she steals souls because she has none of her own. And so, that fills a huge hole in Part 4. Thanks, Magic Kittens. But while on the topic of commenter theories, I think that another really good point made by a commenter was by LPS Everdeen. This person said something rather ingenious. This person said that the key is a button that sews the fabrics of the two worlds together. That's more of a symbolic connection, not plot related, but it is a genius observation nonetheless, so thanks for that intriguing point. And now for what I believe is either the best or most odd thing I realized. In Part 4, I discuss how there's a bit of evidence to say that the cat was human before, and that he was the Beldam's true first victim, but he escaped. Well, prepare to maybe or maybe not have your mind blown. I came to the sudden realization that this grandmother is African American. Okay, so that in itself isn't mind-blowing, but what is when you realize that the cat is black and is voiced by an African American. There are only two characters in the film that are of this nationality. They live in the same area, seem to have similar knowledge, and are both clearly connected. How? Well, I think maybe, just maybe, that before the cat died when he was human, he had children. Let's see. He grew up, and when he was in his 30s or 40s, had twins with a wife. Those kids being the grandma and her sister. The time matches up bang on. The grandma said that she grew up living in the Pink Palace, meaning that they were born there. And if this guy did escape, he'd most likely be terrified of the house and keep it under his protection once his parents died. We do see, however, two children perish in the Pink Palace during this time, meaning he didn't own the house at that time. His parents did, and he didn't tell them about the Beldam, of course, so they rented it out, inadvertently killing two children. When he did inherit it in the mid-1900s, he'd have tried protecting his children, but we see with one of them, he fails. He then later on dies, and in the early 2000s he is brought back to protect his grandson to make up for the lost daughter. Notice how the cat is the one who gives Coraline the twin's soul when she loses it. No, seriously, during Coraline's final trip to the other world, he suddenly disappears when they are both in the portal. Where the heck did he go? Then he suddenly appears right when Coraline loses the twin's soul. Ominous. And maybe I'm looking layers and layers into this, but the deeper you get, the more interesting. For this cat dad theory, there is little evidence, but no debunking facts, so it's pretty cool. We know that the grandma says she doesn't like to rent the house out to families with kids, yet she rents it out to Coraline's family. Her grandson is now of age for the Beldam to want him, about 10, and she rents it out for his protection, sacrificing someone else's kids. Who do you think boarded up the well and made rumors about seeing a sky full of stars from the bottom? The grandma knew what her family had gone through, and she did those things. But please realize that this cat dad theory is just a thought. It is not a part of my grand analysis, so until I find more evidence, don't associate it. But we have to move on to the next point now. What several people have questioned me on is about the well. If the Beldam found it, how was it there in the first place? Well, the thing is, the well itself isn't the portal, the water at the bottom is. But the whole area around the Pink Palace is very supernatural, as seen by chain reactions, such as when she drops the pebble and it begins to rain. And so I'm not entirely sure of the well's origin. This whole area is very supernatural, and I have complete confidence in saying that it's because of the portal. Now, stay with me on this, but it almost looks like it's a large object that fell from space and crashed through the ground, creating a vertical tunnel with a portal at the bottom. After all, the other world is most likely in another dimension, something probably accessible via outer space. But although that works, I don't really want to dwell on this point. But although it isn't fully baked yet, it does make sense. But now, what you've all been waiting for. Another big, creepy, bombshell, mind-blowing theory. And yes, I do have one here. And it's very creepy. All of the questions I asked in Part 4, I figured could be explained by a dream theory, that it was all a dream. But no, it can be explained by something else. Something better. And this is very creepy. All of those questions I asked could be summed up by the fact that the Beldam has control over the real world. And that's where things take a downright horrifying turn for the worse. When Coraline moves in, fog and mist engulfs the city as if it's hiding ominous secrets. And when it appears that they destroyed the Beldam, the clouds part in the shape of her hands for the first time since Coraline arrived. But then of course we're made aware that she is still there. But what can this theory sum up? The doll following Coraline into town to check on what she liked? Summed up. The extra portals created in a door, behind a sign, etc. Summed up as well. The doll suddenly appearing in the trunk? The Beldam has control? That can happen. It's almost as if the magic of the other world is seeping out the portals. This whole thing seems a bit too suspicious, but I'd say for me that the swirling clouds signify the beginning of her reign of terror. Notice how when the clouds swirl and Coraline moves in, the grandma wants Wybie to stay away. This is all too creepy. The odd case of the disappearing parents? Summed up. The magic legitimately shown in the real world via a normal mirror? Summed up. Erased memories? Also summed up. The Beldam has control over the real world, just like a Grand Dame would. No, seriously, if you don't believe me, we see magic everywhere. The mirror is just one example. How about the moving doll? How about the nocturnal transport? This is the real world. How is there magic? It's the Beldam. She has the control. And I'm still not too sure of this, but I think I might have actually seen the blurred image of the doll in town. But that of course is still a maybe. So basically, this is like a dream theory in the way that it sums everything up. Except this is actually pretty legitimate, and legitimately terrifying. The creator of a city continues to watch over Ashland with excessive clouds to block out the truth. But what does fog represent? Well, it's considered to represent the unknown and the uncertainty of the future. It's considered to hide something, usually the truth. No, seriously, fog represents the hiding of a truth, not even kidding. And mist symbolizes distorted vision and perception. Wow, so these writers know what they're doing. And I can't forget the point you've all been asking, does the Beldam take the form of all mothers? And yes, she does. Her third and final form is what she truly looks like after her 150 years. You can still see that she sounds a bit like Coraline's mom, but that's because it's her real voice and shape. Behind the scenes, Terry Hatcher isn't trying to be the mother or even the other mother, she's trying to be the Beldam. So she has altered her voice as best she can, giving it a bit of an old-fashioned accent. And when developing the character, they made her look very different from the other mother's first form. Some of you keep asking if the Coraline and Beldam are related. First, the Beldam's true form appears slightly like Mel Jones. Second, their voices. And third, the garden in the backyard can look like Coraline and the Beldam. But this is probably the biggest stretch I've seen yet, and I just cannot accept this theory. And another question, can the Beldam predict the future? And my final answer is no. And this intro scene, it does not take place 50 years before the rest of the movie like I said in part 4. It just doesn't. Wybie only told Coraline that it was in his grandma's trunk, he said nothing more, meaning since the Beldam has control over the supernatural area, what with all the magic seeping portals, she could have easily put it into the trunk, so yeah. Also something you guys question frequently is why do the rats know Bobinski? Here is the thing, they do not. His mice are taken by the Beldam to serve her, and they know the truth, so the ones that aren't taken remain with Bobinski and they know about everything. Another thing, the Beldam goes after one person at a time, but no adults allowed. They aren't easy to manipulate, so they're not allowed. Children are, but only one at a time, as the Beldam can only satisfy the needs of someone one child at a time. And also, why only one key? And my answer to that is because she needs to give the children a sense of trust and free will to go to her world. And making another key would just be useless to her, as she wouldn't be allowed to go to the real world anyways. The final point I'm going to bring up today is the question on many people's minds revolving around what I called the soul sand in part 4. Minecraft coined the term, and I thought it was directly applicable to what the Beldam was doing. In the movie, the soul sand is magical sawdust made from souls that applies the life of the souls to all the creatures the Beldam fills with the soul sand. She then controls them. But what about the other Wybie and the other father? They seem to have free will. And the point I made to the commenters was that the amount of sand also mattered. And that makes sense. If a creature made by the Beldam has a little amount of soul sand in it, then it can be granted life, and its lack of much of a soul makes it easy to manipulate. The large bugs in the Beldam's study, the tiny animals, the taffy woman, Bobinski filled with tiny rats, etc. The Beldam doesn't need to waste a ton of soul sand on extra characters, but for people like the other father or other Wybie, she needs to fill them with soul sand as they are actually loving ones, and doing this makes them more emotionally self-aware than the rest. And keep in mind that these souls are legitimately the ones the Beldam took from these kids, so the fully filled souls know the truth, and try to help Coraline rather than just mindlessly obeying their creator. This also applies to why some characters can't leave the other world. The small characters can go all over as they have a tiny amount of residual magic, but the larger ones need a supporting world. And as far as the Beldam goes, if her whole body, not just a hand, leaves the other world, her old age will cause her to instantly break down due to a magicless environment. And with her gone, all of her creations would die, and the extra portals would collapse, leaving only the well and a blank spatial void awaiting command, availably accessible by the bottom of the well. Phew. So most of those were just ideas and not actually theories. However, the fog one was kind of a theory and the sand one was kind of a theory, but, you know. So I'm not done with Coraline at all. It's just that this is getting obscenely lengthy. I will probably make another video on it before 2017. I just want you guys to comment any questions you have, because when you do, it makes me look at the film in new ways and completely reveal massive truths about it. So thanks for that. I mean, there's still things I want to discuss, like why there's cotton in the doll to begin with, and what's with the Beldam's obsession with games and tapping her fingers and her button twinkly eyes. I don't know, but I will cover that whenever I get the chance to. And until next time, I'm the Theorizer. So, I'll start by answering those last few questions I had in part 5. Question 1 was, why was there cotton in the doll in the intro scene? Aren't they supposed to be filled with soul sand? Yes, and it was filled with soul sand. You see, as I've said many times, the Beldam's magic deteriorates over time. The other Wybie was composed of sawdust. As the magic weakens in the world, Wybie slowly falls back into his base material. The other father slowly decomposes into a pumpkin, and it was what he was formed from. The jumping mice fade back into rats, the sand faded back into cotton. It's magic deterioration, fading things into what they actually are. I think that the buttons being applied to objects are what holds the magic inside of it, and what keeps it under the Beldam's control. She sews buttons onto rats, fills them with sand, and then they are under her control. I like to think of it like this. She mixes the soul sand with real-world objects, turning the objects into what she wants. She then sews on the buttons, locking in the magic. As I've said constantly, the other mother cannot create, she can only alter. It's similar to how matter cannot be created or destroyed. This may be a separate universe, but the same laws apply. She can suck objects into her world through the many small portals, and she can use her mice to bring her material, but she cannot directly create things without a base. But quickly before the next question, I want to address a confusion you guys have. When I say soul sand, what I mean is not actually their souls, but rather their life force. I just call it soul sand because it sounds much cooler, and it's a nod to Minecraft. It's actually a kind of sawdust-like material. Next point. Why does the Beldam have an obsession with games? Well, she loves to mess with the kids and the cat. Why act so antsy? Well, it all stems from her loneliness. The only people she gets to see are the cat and the kids. That's all she has. The rest of the people aren't real. She wants the entertainment, and she now plays games with her rare company in an act of subconscious entertainment. And the question that I've had forever now is, who's the boy in the picture? We've established that it isn't the cat as a human boy, and we've established that it looks unlike what the blonde ghost boy looks like, so who is it? Is it just a painting that Mel and Charlie brought with them when moving in? Or was it there previously? Well, seeing as how they have a box labeled living room, and that they've been unpacking into an empty room, it's likely that they brought it with them. My first thoughts when watching was that it was theirs, and that it symbolized the family's boringness. But so many commenters have gone on to say that it could have been the Beldam's child, and that she's looking for a child after she lost her other one. And while that's an extremely intriguing thought, I really don't want to go that many layers into this lore. What makes the most logical sense is that it was the Jones family's painting. I also get frequently asked, when Mel went to grab the door key, she scanned around and found the button one, immediately assuming it was the right one. How does she know which one to take? You guys have been saying that maybe she has some sort of bizarre relation to the Beldam, and that she just knows these things. You've said how the garden looks like both Coraline and the Beldam's faces, and maybe they're all genetically related, but I don't know. It's just so many layers of lore, and the depth created here is way too much. I personally believe she just grabbed the most out-of-place key for the most out-of-place door. But speaking of which, what are all the other keys doing there? What are they for? Well, there are many places around the house that require keys to open them. Very interesting. But I'd say the biggest and least answered point by far is why the Beldam likes spiders so much. I've blissfully trotted over this point time and time again, but there's clearly something strange going on here. The creators talk about her spider web and how she's luring Coraline into her trap. The ghost kids talk about how her web is unwinding. She's a seamstress like a spider, and she uses thread as her web. All of her servants are giant bugs, her wallpaper is giant insects, and she eats cocoa beetles from Zanzibar. It goes on and on. I've always said that it's because such unintelligent organisms are easy to control, but she shows more of an obsession than anything. It's extremely stumping. I've also said that it was because she took the magical life force from the bugs that rats brought through, but that's not right. Please give me your thoughts. Do you think it's one of these two things, or something completely different? Odds are, this won't be my final Coraline video, since there is just so much to cover. So much. So give me your buggy ideas. What I find really cool is whenever the Beldam says or hears the word game, her buttons twinkle and she begins finger rolling.
And soon as you're through eating, I thought we'd play a game. Why don't we play a game? I know you like them. Everybody likes games. And what is it you'd be finding, Coraline?
I feel that it all loops back to her boredom, and how she is antsy to have fun with someone that isn't her. Next question, and this is a cool one. Where did the Beldam's eyes go if she used them to create the world? Well, we have a few options, but I'd say the best fit place would be the moon. The moon represents the other world. It may be a big button, but it's what controls the void. It's what holds the magic, and I even think it's the portal that opens to the bottom of the well. It's her soul. The world is controlled by it. But speaking of the well, why'd she enter it in the first place? Did she think her child fell down it? No, I have something much creepier in mind. In each theory prior to this one, I hinted to how the universe wants somebody to occupy it. It is the true villain. It calls to people. It wants people to occupy it. It's like Venom from Spider-Man, if you get my reference. The void is the enemy. It calls to her and she enters it, happy to do so. It is a demander of creation. Now's the time to wrap up the last few questions. How did the Beldam kidnap the parents? When I read this, I got confused. But then I caught something that had been staring me in my button eyes since the beginning. Coraline left the door open. Her mom came home with her dad, left the groceries on the table, and then noticed the door she had left open. They entered it, which was a tragic mistake. Not only did the Beldam have a doll to watch them, but Mel and Charlie's curiosity and will to find their daughter led them into the biggest trap ever. Busting the snow globe was a result of having the spell broken, and this teleported them to the nearest portal outside, letting them walk inside to find Coraline without any memories of the event. So I guess that about wraps up all of the final questions I could read, but it was a lot of fun making these. But I've long since exhausted this movie. I've ripped it apart, and then ripped apart the rip I created. Then I theorized on the ripped rip, but because many people spark new ideas, I do have the feeling that I'm not done. I just watched Kubo and the Two Strings and noticed so many similarities to Coraline. Oh boy, The Moon King, eyeless magical woman, multiple Beldams. Wait, this film, Paranorman, and the Box Trolls need some theorizing attention as well. But until Halloween, I'm the Theorizer. What if I told you that the film Coraline has an extremely hidden backstory, one which took 1.5 years to piece together, and one which ties up every loose end that the film has to offer? This is the ultimate Coraline theory. Hello, I'm the Theorizer. Ends. What we're going to do in this video is delve into the things that the filmmakers removed from the actual movie itself, the deleted scenes. We are also going to rewatch the movie with a whole new lens again, and then produce something out of it. Finally, I'll make a whole other video explaining the entire timeline which was produced by Theories 1 through 6. Let's get started. So there wasn't a whole lot removed from the movie, but they did remove 2 core scenes, which I feel define the movie to a certain extent. When Coraline is bored and is mumbling on to her mom about how she is bored, a spider that was stuck inside of a flower comes out, and Coraline throws it backwards. It lands in her mom's coffee mug. It sits there for quite a while, and then right after her mother drinks from the mug, the spider runs away. So weird. And so interesting, considering how the other mother is a spider-like figure, and she needed to pose as Coraline's mother in order to lure Coraline to her world. It's almost like this spider is taking her DNA or something to bring back to the Beldam. The other important deleted scene is when we see Coraline draw plenty of swirls across a notepad, and it transitions into those huge swirling clouds. Kind of bizarre, right? Yet again, it is the Beldam. She is controlling the world and is creating things which Coraline enjoys. It all gets pretty weird, but it's always fun to check out what they removed from the movie, and then guess why they removed it. So those were the deleted scenes, but before I watch the movie with a new lens, I'm gonna do something I never thought I'd do. In part 6, I said a ton of things, as usual, but many of the things I said were anticlimactic at best. For example, this framed picture of the blue boy. I could have gone in depth as to how it was tied to the Beldam, but instead, I claimed that it was more likely that the Jones family had brought it with them, and was a part of their unpacking. But then I realized, and got a ton of comments telling me, that when Coraline was going around the house counting all of the windows and doors, she noted down a picture of one boring blue boy, implying that she hadn't seen it before. So today, I am going to explain the awesome repercussions that would arise if it were the Grand Dame's picture. There was also the chance that it could have been left there by the other 3 or maybe even 4 previous families living there, but I'm going to assume it was drawn in the mid-1800s like the painting implies. So it was the Beldam's pick. What does this mean for the story? Well, prepare yourselves. I'm about to blatantly say one thing which counters against every single Coraline video I've made henceforth. The blue boy was the Grand Dame's son. This is a point which I've been holding off on revealing ever since my first Coraline video. It was a theory which I had from the very beginning, and which I never really wanted to make a video on. But seeing as how I've established so much already, and seeing as how dozens upon dozens of my viewers have also told me I should look into it, I think I'll finally cover it. The boring blue boy is basically used to contrast Coraline's boredom and her excitement, but he has a huge effect on the lore in general, and therefore I must treat him as more than just a random painting. He seems to be rather important to the Beldam. The study room is the only room that remains in the other world by the time Coraline faces off with the Beldam, and the Pink Palace has countless paintings strewn all over the walls, but this one, it has some kind of significance. His picture in the real world is kind of depressing. He has lost his ice cream to the cruel fate of gravity, but in the fake world, he's happy. Once again, this is to contrast the differences between both worlds. It's a tactic not only used by the filmmakers, but by the Beldam herself to convince the kids. However, the fact that she keeps up the painting even when Coraline realizes that the world's a winding web of death shows that the Beldam holds this picture quite dearly to her. The Beldam, despite her evil, has the clear touch of a mother. She knows how to parent, she knows how child psychology works, and ignoring her evil, you can tell she does love Coraline to some extent. Or she's trying to fill the void left by a dead child, and failing. So, I propose the idea that the other world is more than just a trap that the Beldam got herself locked into. I propose that either the child had died, and this was her way of remembering him, or her child was with her, in on all of this, posing as someone who's always been there, helping out the kids fall into his mother's trap. Oh, look, we do have a character like that. See this mirror? As I said in the previous theory, no parent in their right mind is going to endanger their child like this, to ask them to come and save them. Even mildly neglectful parents like Coraline's know far better than this. It's selfish and weird considering the way their characters act in the rest of the movie. This vision in the mirror, it isn't real. At all. It is the Beldam, again, producing a fake image to lead Coraline back to the other world, and guess what? Coraline wouldn't have even seen this if the cat didn't wake her up and lead her to see it. And then what do we see? We see the cat grab the parent's doll. How does he even know where to find it? And tell me again why this doll is so important. If the Beldam can just take Coraline's parents, then why would she need a doll to spy on them? It makes no sense. Unless it's all done to lure Coraline back in. Notice also how Coraline is about to dispose of the key and the cat gets in her way and meows at her to stop, as he doesn't know what she'll do with it. I mean, the cat does go for Wybie to help in the end, but what is the end game? Death to Wybie. The goal, perhaps? And we see him use the portal at the end, implying that his mother did indeed receive the key that fell down the well. When he figured out that she was going to toss it down the well, he relaxed, and brought Wybie in as well. Death. Notice how he's always with Wybie, walking around with him. Now, this can either be protecting him from the other mother, or him preparing him for the other mother. Remember what Wybie says. It wasn't his idea to give Coraline the doll. It was the cat's. And the doll spies on kids. Things just got real dark. With the Grand Dame calling her son Vermin, everything is sold. Coraline chucks him at the Beldam, he claws out her eyes, selling it. Giving Coraline the last eye to level the playing field and convince her of his heroism. But do I think all of this is correct? No. No, I do not. I don't think the cat is totally evil or anything, but I do believe he may possibly be the boy in the picture, the blue boy who the Beldam lost long ago, who she built an empire for her dead child, where all of his dreams could come true, where he never lost his ice cream, where they could infinitely have fun. And what about the fact that he's a cat? Either it's out of reincarnation or due to something terrible that happened in the other world, or perhaps, and this makes the most sense, her son simply died, and she spends decades attempting to compensate, while simultaneously trying to keep herself alive. So that's all fine and good. I don't know if the cat is good or evil, or if he's even the boy, but I can, more definitively, say that the boy in the painting is the Beldam's son. But there is another part to this new theory. Other Wybie and the other father, they're the only other people who defy the Beldam. Originally, I said it was because they had more soul sand in them, giving them more control of themselves. But then I realized, it's more like they're facades, faking it. The other Wybie saves Coraline from the mirror room and brings her through the portal. But I want you to notice something. The portal isn't the same. It leads her back to the real world, or so we think. No, in this world, casual old ladies have a device that lets you take advantage of another world. Why on earth would they have this? Exactly. It ain't on Earth. It's another level of the fake world, put there, where her parents haven't returned home yet. And when Coraline officially does return home, what do we see? It's the exact same time and weather as when she entered initially, right after her mom left. Coincidence? Nope. And the snow on their clothing? Also a fiction derived from the Beldam's control of the real world. When Coraline actually returns home, notice how the Beldam makes a really hard attempt at trying to stop her from leaving, whereas when Wybie helped her escape the first time, she casually walked down the stairs. all of it leads into a trap. Finally, I have even more evidence for Part 5's theory that the Beldam controls the real world. Look at the swirling clouds above Coraline in the well scene. Magic. Or even the hand. How else could she control it unless her magic seeped out into the real world? And so, I leave you with more ideas to ponder over in the comments section. I want to hear your ideas. And soon, I will release one final timeline, which details the events of everything I've theorized on, all the way from Part 1 to Part 6. But not including this part, as it was a separate theory on the Blue Boy and the Cat. So see you very soon, and until next time, I'm the Theorizer. What if I told you that this creepy witch thing from Coraline was actually a human? What if I told you that the well we see in the film is actually another portal to the other world, and not a secondary portal, but rather the main one? What if I told you that the black cat we see in the movie is actually the grandfather of Wybie? And what if I told you that Coraline herself is never safe in the real world, and that even the real world is all a part of the other mother's twisted, dark, magical agenda? If I told you all of this, you'd probably be wildly curious. Hello, I'm the Theorizer, and Coraline is a movie which I have made more theories on than anything else I've looked at. And it's also a difficult movie to come up with theories on, if the theorizing genre wasn't already hard enough. As I said in the last video, my massive hypothesis is more of a fanfiction so twisted it has to be true, but I don't care, so long as it works. And today I'll be doing the one thing that's long overdue. I'm going to make one gigantic timeline, which explains the entire 6-part theory I came up with. This won't include the recent Part 7, as it was not really a part of the main series, so please, I implore you to watch the other videos before this one. And let's begin, shall we? It all begins with the other mother. I theorized way back in Part 4 that, based off of the date the Pink Palace was built and the age of the Beldam, it was likely that she was the first owner of the Pink Palace. This all happens in the 1850s. I theorized that this woman was amongst the first to settle Ashland, and that the giant house was built in her honor. As we see in the backyard, her face consumes the garden, as opposed to the other world where the garden is more clearly Coraline's face. I then went on to state how she has pictures in the other world of a city, as well as the Pink Palace during daytime, all leading to the idea that she did indeed own the house first. It's likely that she was a seamstress, very likely, but what happens next? The seamstress finds an old well near her house, one which is quite clearly not a well. It's some sort of deep, large object which fell from space and crashed through the ground very deep. As we see, the other world is a different universe, something directly affiliated with space. It crashes deep into the ground and lands and stops. The Grand Dame falls down the hole one day, sort of like an Alice in Wonderland thing, and she was lured to it by the power radiating off of it. She falls through, pops out through the portal at the bottom, and is launched into a pocket universe void. Emptiness. Using her own soul by ripping out her eyes, she begins to create the laws of this alluring universe, and uses her own soul to create magic, allowing her to do anything she wishes in this universe. This, of course, leads to the eventual problem of losing the magic after a while of being trapped in there. Needing a refill, she uses what's left of it to build a very child-friendly world, so that she could lure the new residents of the house up top into her traps. She acts very motherly and fools the kids into wanting to stay, allowing their souls to be very potent and full of happiness and life and love, to keep her more alive. With this plan in mind, she puts her eyes in place of the moon. She can see all, and her soul controls the world. Her magic begins to seep out into the real world, and she creates a doll which she can see through. She uses it to spy on the child in her abandoned house, and molds the world around their likes and needs. She uses her magic to change the real world and create multiple portals, allowing for the servants she's created with her soul to run around the real world and do things for her that she couldn't do herself. You see, if she leaves her pocket universe, her magic will all fade away, and the whole entire universe will die, along with her and her old age. More evidence to support that the well is a portal is that the mushroom pattern around it denotes a fairy ring, something in mystical lore known to be an indication of an otherworldly entrance. One of the portals she creates is a tiny door in the wall which leads directly inside of a fake house she's created. She sends the key through as well, as the boy living in the house must come willingly for his soul to be potent enough for her magic. He eventually comes through and the Grand Dame almost traps him, but he realizes what is going on and escapes, terrified. This leads the Grand Dame to lose all of the magic her soul had to offer, and she begins to deteriorate over the years. She begins to replace her rotting body parts with needles, the only thing she has left after she lost her magic. She only has bones and hair left after her skin and organs rot away. She also sucks in the souls of bugs in the well, and sucks life out of anything that gets near her other portals. She becomes a monstrous behemoth of sewing equipment and amalgamative bug species, collectively making her into a spider-like figure. The boy who once traveled to her world in the late 1800s has now become a father, and more families with kids have moved into the house, while he lives a short distance away. He thinks that these new children will be fine. He owns the house, and he figures that he killed the witch after he left her alone. But he was wrong. And after he inherited the house from his parents, kids start going missing. The Beldam had improved after losing the first kid. She developed a style, an unbeatable method. First it was a girl with long blonde hair, then it was a little boy with blonde hair, and then the father moves back into the house so that nobody else will, telling his daughters not to go anywhere near the door. And they of course go against him, and he loses one of his daughters, moving back out of the house. He dies much later and leaves the house to his remaining daughter. Meanwhile, the seamstress had been forcing her servants to steal real-world objects. She takes them and she alters them into new creatures, using the children's life forces she's taken, crushing them into sand, which she uses as filling for her creatures. She then sews buttons onto them, locking in the magic and allowing her to see what they see. Creations that are portrayed as very loving characters require much more soul sand in order to act naturally and more human. We see this with Wybie and the other father. They have so much soul sand in them that they actually go against their programming and betray the other mother to save Coraline. I named it soul sand because it has a nice ring to it and, you know, Minecraft. But technically, it's a dusty material which is composed of life essence. The souls themselves are actually trapped in the pocket universe with the Beldam. And when the life force runs out of these creations, they slowly reform into what they truly are. The other father, a pumpkin. Other Wybie, sawdust. The jumping mice, rats. And the sand inside of the dolls, cotton. Anyways, the twin daughter wasn't taken by the Beldam, grows up, and has kids who she doesn't let anywhere near the house. She even boards up the well, knowing what it may or may not be capable of. She spreads rumors that if you fall down, you'd see a sky full of stars in the middle of the day. Her kids have kids, and she adopts her grandson. She protects her grandson and doesn't let him go anywhere near the house. The Beldam is needing another refuel of life essence. She's failing to live off of much else other than what's left of the 3 children she'd already taken. She begins to prey on this grandson, known as Wyborn. Kind of a weird name, I know, and now, and only now, I see the significance of his name. Asking him why he was born is kind of a cruel thing, and to be fated with such a name, that's brutal. But to name him that out of fear that you won't be able to protect him, like, why were you born? Now I have another person to worry about protecting from the witch who likes to stitch. Makes total sense. Now a grandma, she fears for her grandson's safety and allows another child to move into the Pink Palace. Sort of conniving and evil of her, risking someone else's child for her own grandchild. She even leaves the key right there in the house for someone else to find. For someone who never lets kids play in the Pink Palace, this is a bit strange. Meanwhile, there was a reincarnation going on. The universe attempting to save the child closest to the witch, Wybie. The only boy who ever escaped the other mother all those years ago is reincarnated to save his own great-grandson after he failed to save his own daughter, the cat, who stays with and protects Wybie, whose ethnicity and accent is identical to Wybie's grandmother. He simultaneously spies on Coraline, the new girl who'd moved in. Eventually, his knowledge of the other world is what leads to Coraline's survival after the Beldam's defeat. Or so he thinks. He realizes that the well is a portal, of course, only after Coraline throws the key down it. Neither of them had this knowledge, and then, at the movie's end, we see the cat use a portal, implying that he found the other world again, still there, with the Beldam still out to get Coraline. So that's the gist of it. The timeline I came up with in a brief summary. There is a lot more information, you just have to watch the first 6 parts. And so, with that, I'm done with this grand theory. I'm certain there's still more Leica movies I can theorize on, and I may even tie them to Coraline, but you heard it right here, right now, from me. The Theorizer's Grand Theory Spectacular, the origin of the human Beldam theory and the soul sand theorization. Until next time, whenever that may be, I'm the Theorizer. It's been an incredibly long time since I last made a video on the film Coraline, but this is only because I got tired of it. Since then, a couple other channels have cropped up who have also made a bunch of Coraline theories, but I'm, not strictly speaking, done with this movie. For those who are unaware, back in 2015 to 2017, my channel grew fairly fast because I made an 8-part video series on the animated film known as Coraline due to the ridiculous levels of mystery it contains, but in all honesty, I only got around to making like 3 actual theories. The other 5 videos were just me answering your questions. Many of you even thought Coraline was my channel's main series. One of the theories was about the timeline of the ghost kids and how Coraline never truly escapes from the other world in the end. One was about how the other mother used to be a human, and the last one was about how the cat was working with the Beldam. Making theories on this film has become increasingly difficult due to the other Coraline theorists who've now popped up, as ideas are growing increasingly thin, and rightfully so. It's not a very big movie. So taking another objective look at this movie at your guys' violently constant requests, I'm returning to an idea I've had in mind since my first and second run-through of this film, how there can actually be more than one cat. Hello, I'm the Theorizer, and it'd probably be a good idea to watch my other Coraline videos before this one, or in the very least, parts 7 and 8. Don't really think of this video as part 9, it's sort of just another video. However, because of the way I have formatted my channel, the title will say part 9. So first off, I'm not the only one who's picked up on this idea about there being 2 cats. It's one of those ideas that I'm sure everybody ponders but drops because it's less important to the other theories. It's something you actually may suspect the first time you watch the film. After all, the massive difference is that the cat can talk in the other world. So is one cat one and the other another? If this is indeed the case, it would mean that all of my previous theories are correct to a degree. In fact, it would tie the 7th one to all the others, if you know what I mean, because it means that one cat is the Beldam's son, who I claimed to be the blue boy, and the other is Wybie's great-grandfather. We will need tons of evidence to support a theory of 2 different cats, and don't fear, I have a bit, but first, the timeline I've prior instated crumbles down at the factor of something frivolous and near insignificant. The initial patent date of ice cream cones. So many of you, and this shocked me, have hit me with hard evidence regarding the boring blue boy and where he must sit in the timeline. Ice cream cones were created in 1896 by an Italian living in New York. In 1903, his patent was granted, so if the blue boy was the Grand Dame's son, born in the mid to late 1800s, then it would be incredibly unlikely for him to be so modernized like this with an ice cream cone. The boy actually looks like he's from the 1900s. He is not, however, the blonde ghost boy in the other world. So there we have it. A slightly shifted timeline, but 2 cats. And based sheerly on how my theories have flown up until this point, there's a good chance that one is the Beldam's first victim, and one is the Beldam's son. Though, we know now that her son is not likely the blue boy. There are so many possibilities to my theories, and I shall never settle on just one, as it would make me a poor theorizer. Let's look at the 2 cats and try to figure out their greater differences. There's the obvious big one, which is that the other cat, who I will call Vermin for now, has a voice, and the real one, who I'll call Mr. Lovat, does not have a voice. Also, Mr. Lovat shows great concern for Coraline and monitors her constantly, whereas Vermin sort of just leaves her to die in the Beldam's web. But Vermin can traverse our world as well, further complicating things. Vermin, the other cat, is of course the one who was seen at the very end of the film, disappearing through a portal. Then the movie cuts to black with a dramatic thud. I've analyzed what this dramatic thud could mean many times, but I think it may just be revealing that this is the other cat, revealing that he's the one who Coraline let back through the portal. Now, Mr. Lovat and Vermin both exist in the real world, which explains the cat's approval as Coraline threw the key down the well, a well we know at this point to be the other world's main portal. This has been a tough point of my other videos because only a few minutes before she does this, we see the cat trying to stop Coraline from getting rid of the key, but it finally makes sense. That is Mr. Lovat, the real cat, and he's still back in the house where Coraline left him. Vermin is the one who witnessed the key go down. He's the one who smiled at it. He's the one who was pulled back to the other world by his mother, the Beldam, at the very end of the film, revealing their plan and their continued existence. Vermin is the only one we see teleporting. Mr. Lovat never does this. What's even weirder, however, is that something complicates all of this even further. When we look at the blue boy painting in the other world, his eyes bear a striking resemblance to that of the cat. The exact same shade of blue with a rather large black dot in the center. Even the mouth looks all weird, almost like he has sharpened teeth and an elongated tongue. Yet, Vermin, the other cat, has the voice that I claimed Mr. Lovat would have. It's like they're reversed. Why? Well, it means that Vermin is putting on this fake voice to mimic the spirit of Mr. Lovat. All of this weird timing also means something else, however, that the blue boy cannot possibly be Vermin, the Beldam's son. This whole chain of missing children must have begun in the early to mid 1900s. The blue boy must have been her first victim, I'm sure of it, but please don't confuse what I mean by that. Her first victim was the blue boy, but her first attempt at succeeding was Mr. Lovat when he was a child. But the first one she actually succeeded at luring and killing was the blue boy. It's why she and Vermin framed him on their wall. It's their crowning achievement. The boy that saved them from a loss of magic, that saved them from their deaths. He's a symbol of the other world. The first thing you see when you get there is that the sad blue boy has been made happy, and he's also got even more scoops of ice cream than he had before. And as the world progresses, he goes from happy mode into spider mode. His soul is the original savior of Vermin, his mother, and their world. So where is his ghost then? Well, quite simply, it's gone. The Beldam was still learning her method of kidnapping and manipulation, and of course, they were desperate for life after Mr. Lovat escaped. They didn't keep Blue. They needed all that soul power to sustain themselves. The soul was completely destroyed along with the eyes. Are you following me? Basically what I'm saying is that the other cat, known to us only as Vermin, is the Beldam's son. The real cat is Wybie's great-grandfather, the first person the Beldam went after but failed at. And finally, the boring blue boy in the framed picture is the Beldam's first true victim, the first one she succeeded at ripping the soul power from. One might ask why Vermin tore out his mother's eyes when Coraline threw him at her, and well, isn't it obvious? He's letting Coraline escape so that they can work the system all over again. The Beldam can just sew her eyes back on. It's clearly not a difficult task. It's just like how they discuss the Beldam's hatred for cats. It's all a trick. She's trying to keep out Mr. Lovat, not her son. Her son is not really a cat. And when Vermin gets into the real world at the end, he assures that Mr. Lovat stays in the Pink Palace, while he watches Coraline return the key to the Grand Dame herself via the well. And once ready, he returns home through a quick portal created by his mother. Movie ends. Story doesn't. Coraline's so dead. The Beldam and Vermin spy on Coraline too. That's quite clearly how Vermin knew that she called Mr. Lovat a wuss-puss. Vermin feeding Coraline the information about the other world is an attempt to prove his goodness to her, but the fact that he knows all of this to begin with is something to question. Even his little statement about asking how she tastes is a little dark, and honestly is something we should be questioning. This all leaves question. Which cat led Coraline to that mirror in that scene? Well, obviously it was Vermin luring her back. Mr. Lovat would never do that, as he's the one trying to protect her and her alone. Vermin's also the one who probably put the parents' doll under the bed. After all, he is the one who showed Coraline where it was. And for those of you wondering, the reason he doesn't have button eyes is because he doesn't need them. First of all, he has to convince Coraline that he's Mr. Lovat. But second of all, remember what I said in previous videos. The Beldam used her own eyes to initially power the world. Vermin was who she was protecting at all costs. Her son. His eyes need not to be given up. The big final question about this is then, why did Vermin give Coraline the final ghost eye? Why would he need to further convince her at this point? They practically had Coraline in their grasp, but something must have changed, and I think I may know what. Coraline has a very tough spirit, and the eyes need to be sewn into her willingly, as the Beldam states. And the only way to do that is to break her spirit and trick her. The Beldam opened up the little door during the climax, knowing full well what Coraline was going to do. Obviously. Who wouldn't see that coming? Isn't the Beldam a manipulative genius? Yes, she is. She didn't even close it when she was done taunting Coraline. She just left it open because they didn't need to trap her. They needed to break her spirit. And the rest of their plan is something we don't know about because the movie unfortunately ends. But I have some ideas, though those are for a later video, which I probably will eventually make. If you want to know why I think these two cats are the son and Mr. Lovat, watch my older theories, but I do know that they are at least two different characters. There are two cats. One is sarcastic, and one has a deep concern for Coraline. I suppose there's also a chance that Vermin could have been someone in the other world even longer than the Beldam. Perhaps an original inhabitant, an alien of sorts. No, let's stick to this for now. Anyways, I have more ideas than just the stuff about the cat, though. I guess I'll share those right now, too. One of my ideas is about the other world and how the magic slowly rots away. When Coraline first gets there, if you look out the kitchen window, the moon is very thin. It's recently recovered from being a new moon and is in the first phase. In other words, the other world's news cycle has just been activated as Coraline's gotten there. The second time Coraline gets there, the moon is about half full when you look out the window. However, when she goes outside, it's a massive and popping full ball in the sky. This is a fake moon that's just sitting there in the garden, obviously. This is all further proof that only the things in the other house are real. The moon later becomes full and then is eclipsed with a button. The moon is like a timer of the other world's magic. This is something very cool I picked up on, and it basically shows us why the Beldam was as pushy and abrupt as she was. She was on a magical time limit that she set for herself. Another idea I have is regarding the bugs seen on the flowery wallpaper. I do believe they are scarabs. Doing a quick search regarding the symbolism of scarabs, we find that they symbolize an infinite system of rebirth and regeneration, as they do some really gross things to constantly sustain themselves. It's a relatively similar thing to what the Beldam does, turning old stuff into new stuff and recycling dead children. She feeds life into things and feeds on it herself, constantly regenerating her body. Boom! On to the next thing I noticed. I do believe that something perhaps scientific relates to the other world, and maybe even extra-dimensional. Like the other world being a place trapped in time, or rather a location accessible through the fourth dimension, like a pocket of time. What I'm trying to say is, maybe the other world is actually the past or future, and the portal is a dimensional gateway, but I don't know where I'd fully take this idea. I mean,
It's like the whole Pink Palace is segregated from existence, what with its swirly clouds at times, but I'll hold off on this for now. Finally, there's a lot of Native American symbolism I never noticed before in this film. There's a native chief's gilded head just sitting there on the other father's music studio, and there are deer antlers on the wall. Ashland, Oregon has a lot of history with natives, but if I ever really get into that, it will be during a video of its own. So yeah, while I do love this film, I've gotten a bit tired of it over the past several months because now lots of people are theorizing on it and it's beginning to feel less unique than when I started it. However, I still like doing it to an extent. I always kind of will because it's wickedly mysterious. Expect probably something else in the coming months as I've just opened a bunch of new cans of worms with this video, so hooray! Until then, I am the Theorizer. Coraline is a very interesting movie because of its unique ability for me to theorize on theories I've created. If you're watching this, I hope you've seen my other parts, or at least parts 7, 8, and 9, because they will allow you to understand this. First, a refresher. I have this theory that the Beldam used to be human, and her son was trapped in the other world by falling down the well, which is actually the main portal. Going after him, she became tethered to the other world, but the son was allowed to roam between worlds so long as he took the form of something like a cat. Needing soul magic to power their world, they attempted at ripping the soul from a boy named Mr. Lovat, but he escaped, growing up to Father Wyvie's grandmother and being resurrected in the form of a cat to protect his great-grandson. At the end of the film, Mr. Lovat stays in the Pink Palace while Vermin, the son, the other cat, approves of Coraline chucking the key down the well. A portal she has no idea leads right back to the Beldam. But why did they let Coraline escape the other world? Obviously it was because they didn't need to capture her, they needed to break her spirit, and at the end of the film, Vermin disappears back into the other world, so what are they going to do to Coraline next? Here's where I have a few ideas. Theorizer, and if you have any questions like, why was Mr. Lovat resurrected as a cat, or what are they going to do to Coraline now, I have some theories, some good ones, and again, these are theories, some without much evidence, but I still find them absolutely crucial to solving the ultimate mysteries this film has to offer. We are beginning to get on the rocky territory of theorizing on my theories, which has very shifty ground, but nonetheless awesome implications. First, the question impossible to logically answer: how on earth was Mr. Lovat resurrected, and why as a cat? It was something I said way back in part 4 because it made sense, but the reasons behind how exactly this is possible are quite hard to decipher. Why resurrection? Why a cat? Well, there's a possibility that he was reincarnated as a feline specifically so that he could fool the other mother. Since Vermin takes the form of a cat quite frequently, it would confuse the Beldam and allow for him slipping in and out unnoticed. It makes even more sense then why Vermin stole Mr. Lovat's voice. They are masking as each other, ultimately confusing both the Beldam and Coraline. But that's just why he's a cat. The resurrection itself, though, is where things get really interesting. It's not a godly entity or biblical thing going on here, it's quite simply the other world's soul power and magic. Mr. Lovat is kept alive by the magic seeping out of the pocket universe. Whether it be from the well, the door, or the sign portal, it's what's keeping him alive. Think about it like this. He was the first person to move into the house after the Beldam, and after he moved out of it as a child, traumatized, he kept an eye on it, eventually seizing legal control over it. He of course let the Blue Boy's family move in, which was a mistake, as were the families of the next two kids, and his daughter of course was the last straw, but he always stayed. Everybody else was moving away out of fear, probably even his wife, except for of course his remaining daughter, who knew much about the other world because of her twin sister. The only person up until their death who would have stayed there would have to have been the grandma's dad, Mr. Lovat. someone a generation above the grandma. This further proves the existence of Mr. Lovat, as someone had to give the house to Grandma. But my point is, he stayed here up until his death. He's the only person in history to die in the immediate region nearby the Pink Palace without being in the other world. This tethers him to the area, but not fully. In other words, his body is not kept alive, but he instead comes to possess the nearest symbolically supernatural animal, the black cat. Mr. Lovat's body was buried somewhere nearby, perhaps near the well or the sign or the other empty apartment. More on that in a second. His spirit, however, did as I've theorized and found its way. The grandma and her father knew all about the other world, as I prior stated, and it was them who boarded up the well and told Wybie the rumors about a sky full of stars. If Mr. Lovat's corpse was placed in the empty apartment next to Coraline's, then it explains why it's never rented out. It's a very freaky idea, only supported by the fact that it isn't rented out, but since I have literally nothing more to go on, it's quite unlikely that this is the case. The other option is that maybe he was actually the one who dug the well, trying to find the other world, thinking it was underground, and when he did find some form of magical pocket, his spirit vaporized. This too is unevidential, and not something I will right now dwell on. Whatever the case may be, we know his ghost, mixed with the other world's soul power, kept him stuck as this cat. We know this is very likely to be the case because we already know how the other spirits react to the other world's soul magic. They aren't quite dead. They have the ability to grab onto things, such as the blanket in their dungeon, and they can willingly lay on the physical bed. They even use their metaphysical hands to close the door for Coraline. They also appeared in Coraline's dream. Dreams are an amalgamation of neurological chemical processes. This, of course, all happened because of the magic seeping. But regardless, they can do things that spirits normally cannot. So is it really such a stretch to say that Mr. Lovat is similar? No, it is not a stretch in the slightest, because everything that dies in the presence of the other world's magic becomes a physical spirit. Physical ghosts, physical cat, bingo. Seeping. It's why the Beldam's hand can remotely move. It's right between three sources of portal magic: the door, the sign, and obviously, of course, the well. It's all very cool, but we aren't even to the main point of this video yet. What's Vermin and the Beldam's plan for Coraline now that they let her go? Well, they're going to slowly break her down, of course. She's about to go to school for a fresh year, and they're going to make the mediocrity of society so boring and tormenting that Coraline is going to willingly return to the other world. It's how they do things. Car crash causes Coraline's parents to be boring and inactive for the first few days. Wonder who triggered that. Old ladies downstairs are practically insane and nuts. Wonder who caused that. The second Coraline returns to the real world, she gets her fun with family and all that she wants, right until they plan to snatch it all away and drive her to her own willing death. It's incredibly devious, manipulative, underhanded, and precisely the kind of thing the Beldam has already been doing. As I said in my third theory all that time ago, there's still a chance that the world Coraline's in at the end of the movie is still more of the other world, all faked. Regardless though, Coraline will be driven back. The seed has been planted. The temptation will grow too great. It's in her personality to act like this, and the Beldam, that psychotic grand dame seamstress, knows this. Something to note is that the distinction between Vermin and Mr. Lovat becomes increasingly blurred up until the end of the film. For example, when Coraline goes through the portal to save her parents, the cat enters it with her, presumably Vermin. Suddenly, he stops, shakes his head out of confusion, and now has the ability to speak. One would think this is because there's only one cat, and Mr. Lovat just regained his ability to speak through the portal, but no. In fact, it's Vermin, who has regained his ability to speak by entering a pocket of immense magic. The line of division gets blurrier, though, such as how Mr. Lovat showed anger towards Coraline despite it being Vermin she threw at the Beldam. There are clearly other things going on, because only the end of the film prominently throws the distinction between between them at us. It's all in that final clip, the dramatic thud. I'm not done with Mr. Lovat, though. I think he may have been the person who forged that triangle with the hole in it. Kind of weird that Spink and Forcible had it, and the fact that it actually works on the other world. It means it has otherworld magic inside of it, and that it's directly wired to reveal the truth of the other world. It was forged with the other world in mind, likely by the only person who knew of its true nature, who escaped. This also explains the Beldam's visible sense of joy as she melts away the only object that can foil her fantasy. It's the petty feud she has with Black Cat Lovat. Want a bit of a mind blow? If you look at the other world from this shot, as they are falling into the web, you can see what appears to be a shadow of sorts next to the free hanging wall. The room isn't just floating through extra-dimensional space, it has a ceiling. A white ceiling. This shouldn't come as a surprise, since I've before theorized that the well portal popped out at the moon, which is powered by the Beldam's eyes, and the moon is of course the top of the ceiling. But now we have explicitly visible proof that there's something of an indistinguishable white ceiling to the other world. Also, her wallpaper glows with what appears to be spider-like green magic, but when she uproots the flooring, the glow disappears, and it reveals itself to be simply nothing more than wired spider lights, which are literally plugged in. Is this an indication that the real world has the power to seep through into the other world too? Maybe. What I do believe, though, is that this room has some level of realism to it. Directly above it, or perhaps it itself, is the sewing room we see at the beginning. It outlooks to space. By the way, the ground is not naturally an elongated web, it's a typical floor. She only uprooted it for the multi-legged ease in capturing Coraline. In fact, I bet there's only one room in the other world. Ever. When Coraline gets there, she moves from room to room, but never sees multiple rooms at once. It's because the Beldam is conserving her energy. She's not going to keep all rooms active at once. She only needs to activate the one Coraline's gonna be in. Even outside, one room. It finally explains why they dwelled on that one shot of the other father shutting off the light in the kitchen as they all left. The room vaporizes the second after they exit it. The sewing room is real. Perhaps it's even a room in the apartment next to Coraline's, though I have no evidence for that yet. What I do think, however, is that the one room is caused by the real world leaking in. It's no longer just a void. There's a constant and unchanging coordinate, the study room. Another little thing I spotted was how the looking hole punctured in the well was gone at the end of the film. Coraline looked through it, and then it disappeared by the end. This makes me question who put it there in the first place. Clearly, the well is a method of spying, like a looking glass. So someone looked down there to see how deep the well was, or perhaps to see the other world, but at the end, it was covered up so that nobody could experience its horrors ever again. Meaning it was either the grandma or Mr. Lovat who's done this. We know the grandma is primarily bound to her house out of her indelible fear of the Pink Palace, so I bet it was Mr. Lovat. Kitty be shoving hardened dirt into that hole, keeping out any ability for them to spy on the children. This further proves that there may be two cats, as Vermin spent his time in the other world with Coraline, while Mr. Lovat did the required task. Also, I do have a theory that it is a time portal through the fourth dimension, and that the other world is not a pocket universe or alternate dimension, but rather a reality existing outside of space-time, a coordinate of infinity existent before the Big Bang. It explains why the Beldam can create and destroy her own universe. The other world is outside of the laws of physics. Finally, before I finish this pretty solution-filled video, I'd like to stop and look at something seemingly pointless: the apple trees near the well. They're all dead, and one's even been chopped down, likely to make the wood covering for the well. But later in the film, they become trees with pink leaves. They're full and healthy and spring-like. It's as if the Beldam triggering her magic when Coraline arrives caused it all to seep through into the real world and heal everything around the Pink Palace. Just something I noticed to probably prove my theory of magic seeping, and by extension, literally everything else. See you soon for the other explanations I promised back in part 9. Until then, get hyped. I'm the Theorizer. Warning, before watching this I heavily recommend you watch my other videos on Coraline, or at least the more recent ones like parts 9 and 10. So, look at this freaky monster. The other mother quite clearly is, or was, a seamstress, but why is she a seamstress? This is a question I have never dwelled upon because all we really needed to talk about was what she did after moving into the Pink Palace, but she knows the tertiary colors offhand, and she has a fetish for buttons, and she replaced her rotting appendages with needles. She's a hardcore seamstress, but what more can we do with this information? Well, that's the mind blow I'll be solving in today's video, along with the massive question about the two cats, and how they contradict each other. Hello, I'm the Theorizer, and I'm still a bit sick from when I got sick before, so you can probably hear it in my voice. Anyways, as I said in parts 9 and 10, there are two cats, not one. One of the cats is Wybie's grandma's dad, who we know as Mr. Lovat. He is the real-world cat who cannot talk. The other cat is someone, possibly the son of the Beldam, who only makes himself look like a cat so he can traverse the portals with ease, and by the end of the film, to convince Coraline. We call him Vermin. It all explains so much, like how the cat doesn't want Coraline to throw the key down the well, but then he smiles after she does it. This contradiction alone can sustain the theory, but there's so many more bits of evidence that I also discussed, making it a theory that may seem really out there, but that doesn't mean it's incorrect. It's quite simply the only explanation for the hidden plot holes, but there are some flaws in this theory which I intentionally pointed out in part 10, such as how Mr. Lovat approaches Coraline's window angry, but it was Vermin who she threw at the other mother, and then how it was Mr. Lovat who got Wybie to save Coraline from the hand, but then the cat appears and smiles at the key being thrown down. Also, when Coraline enters the portal for the final time, the cat stops, shakes his head, and suddenly has the ability to speak as if he's snapped out of being a normal cat. These contradictions are very minor and pale in comparison to the contradictions of there only being one cat, but these theory flaws still remain. So, since February, I have been writing out a list of possibilities that alter my theory. I mean, it's not like one cat is physically hopping up and replacing the other. That's just weird and too convoluted, and Mr. Lovat would have tried to tell Coraline. No, it has to be something that involves Mr. Lovat not knowing he's being changed. And they do change in an instant, which is why there is only one remaining explanation that, while incredibly convoluted, does in fact explain literally every plot hole away. The only remaining possibility that allows this film to function without plot holes, I kid you not, is that there is one cat, but two souls. I know, it sounds crazy, but it is the only explanation. The other possibility is that this film is simply riddled with tiny plot holes, but that route is no fun, and we also know it can't be the case because of the amount of work that's gone into this film. They accurately got the phone number area codes right, the license plate codes, it's ridiculous. If it sounds convoluted, believe me, it is not. The filmmakers of Coraline do exactly this kind of thing constantly. One cat, two spirits inside of it, Mr. Lovat and Vermin. At this point, we are all well aware that Mr. Lovat was resurrected by the other world's seeping magic, and we also know that Vermin is not really a cat. This pushes for the idea that Vermin, of course, has possessed Mr. Lovat in order to get closer to Coraline. Don't believe me? I don't blame you. This is incredibly deep into the lore, deeper than I've ever delved before, and we're not even to the seamstress's backstory yet, but I do think I have some more evidence for this shared body theory. In fact, my evidence is actually one of the points that used to be a contradiction: the shaking head. This shaking head is not the cat gaining the ability to speak from the portal, but rather him switching into vermin form so that he can lure Coraline into the concept of playing a game with the Beldam. This actually makes more sense than it being from him gaining the ability to speak. I mean, what would shake someone up more? Speaking ability or literal personality shift? He ends up switching back to Lovat due to shock when Coraline throws him at the Beldam, at which point he stops talking eating and starts making only cat noises as he rips out the Beldam's eyes. Holy crap, that's a neat detail I just noticed now. He doesn't say a word as he rips out the Beldam's eyes. He only seems capable of meowing as he does it, and then meows as he runs through the portal. Such a neat detail after he was literally just talking a moment ago. Only explanation for this. I'm sorry if it's convoluted, but it's the only possible explanation. I'm not the only one who's considered this. I had a bunch of people on Part 10 propose the exact same idea. I'm not alone on this. It just seems too crazy to be true, but this whole film does that. So viewers, look into the mythology of cats. This film also loves symbolism, and I'm sure there's something on cats and possession. You guys are really good at this kind of thing. After all, it was you who proved my portal theory when you told me about the fairy ring. And once again, there's also the possibility that Vermin is not even the Beldam's son, and is in fact the original spirit of the other world who lured the Beldam down the well and corrupted her because he wanted to play an entertaining game, but I'll get back to that in a sec. So now onto the Beldam, the seamstress. We know she is not a legitimate spider, but she's clearly a fan of them because of how they are incredibly symbolic of a seamstress, elegantly weaving patterns and materials. However, the Beldam cannot create silk. She has identical teeth to that of a human, a similar skeletal pattern except for her lower half, which is entirely replaced by needles and thinning bone. Her upper body is quite malformed from the decades of deterioration, but she remains quite obviously human. And other than the 8 holes throughout her eyes, she shows no other indications of favoring the number 8, like spiders often symbolically do. She has 4 legs but 2 arms. She has 5 fingers on each hand. Even her webs don't follow the symbolically expected pattern of 8 edges. Some have 9, some have 10, some of her web shapes even have 12 sides. The webs seen in her sewing room and throughout the portal are real cobwebs and are created by real spiders, but that's not her. And her sewing room is real. It's not a fake creation of hers. It's a real room, wherever it truly is. This is because everything inside of it is stuff from her past life. Her sewing materials, threads, her sewing machine, all of it. And by the way, we know for a fact that she is born in the 1800s based solely off of the sewing machine, its style, and the fact that it is real. The doll is real too. It's not a fake creation. The enchanted sawdust life-powered soul sand, however, as I've said, is magically artificial, hence it eventually turning into cotton. This room appears to be an attic, a very old one, with an almost triangular ceiling. An attic room that seems to have been built a very long time ago for the Beldam. The ground is simply wooden planks, something indicative of very old times. The wallpaper is something old as well. Wallpaper was popularized around 1800, once again proving how she was born in the mid-1800s. The mats on the floor appear to almost be old skins of animals, further implying that this room is all that's left of her past life from the old world of furs and pioneering. And I don't know where this room is. It's almost like it's in the real world, or it touches the other world, or it touches the real world. I don't know. It's either an in-between, or it's like the heaven of the other world, the spot where the Beldam creates everything, threads the world together. It's all done from this one spot. It's like a place above the other world, a completely separate location, one that I feel has very close ties to the real world, if not actually being in it. But it's old. Many of her buttons are mysteriously broken down, and she's old. Her main dress has clear signs of rats having bitten the edges over time. Cool to note is that the sewing room has green light like the study, even according to the literal script, so it must be tied to the study perhaps? I don't know, but these rooms I have constantly compared. Another question is the dungeon an actual place? The answer is I don't know. This video has a constantly shifting focus, but that's something we can discuss later because I don't have much evidence for it being real or fake, so I'll just hold off. But quite clearly the Beldam was a seamstress. I have this feeling that the Beldam had a clothing store or something, but the store we see in the movie was a renovated version of it. She does very observantly know the exact kind of gloves Coraline wants, and this clothing store and its establishment date seems to be a focus the movie has for some reason, but the dates are all screwy, meaning it would need to be a renovation when they moved new stores in. After all, the building would have been vacated after the Beldam's disappearance. According to the film's script, the tunnel to the other world has little toys and clothes in it because of the other kids who tried to escape. And this is a neat little tidbit of info, as it explains why we see such things as shoes of the ghost kids, some of their supposed toys, a dead freaking rat with red eyes, and right next to the other world door, we see, yes, the blue boy's outfit flipped inside out. That, or it's just quite faded, or it's just the lighting, but that pattern is undeniably familiar. And this is stop motion animation. The filmmakers would have had to physically create the shirt that they drew on the boy. Well, that outright proves it. The blue boy was a victim. A victim totally annihilated, as we've established. Gone from the dungeon, perhaps never even having gone there. Weird little other things can be seen too. A glowing orb turns into what looks like a rotting child's body morphed into the side of the wall, but that could really be anything if you look at it hard enough. Speaking of the portal though, something I believe I've brought up before is how the books describe the portal as a moving, breathing, warm, fluffy thing, which later becomes moist and hot like a mouth, and ancient, far older than the Beldam. The books also claim it is conscious, almost like it's something's esophagus, I'd say, which is interesting, to say the very least. I strongly believe it's because it has ties to the well, and some of the other qualities of the well tunnel are attributed to the portal. Basically, all accesses to the other world and the other world itself, even if morphed and portalized and altered by the Beldam, is old, and as I've been saying, is also alive. This is what further pushes me to assume that something is possessing Mr. Lovat the cat. I've been saying Vermin is the other mother's son, but really, it could be even just the Beldam, or, as I've really been hinting, the spirit of the other world. That enormous alien monster, the true villain, the one responsible for the Beldam being lured into the world and being corrupted. It feeds off of its own inhabitants, hence why the Beldam deteriorated at all. Now that's a bit mind-blowing, and may even be my main route. It makes a little more sense than the Beldam's son, since the only evidence I had for that was that the Beldam is very motherly and understands children on a very deep level. I don't even know, maybe the other world is the thing that turned her into a spider figure. It would explain why there's cobwebs all over the tunnel. If that's a part of something living and it's got cobwebs inside of it, maybe it is what turned her into a spider figure, because its theme is to do with spiders. Finally, the grandma is evil, but not in the way you think. YB feels hesitant about talking to Coraline about the missing children or the history of the Pink Palace because his grandma has specifically told him to tell Coraline nothing. This is basically just more evidence to support my older theory that the grandma let Coraline move in simply to save her grandson from being kidnapped. Well, that's all I've got this time, but I'll surely be back again, eventually. This video established a hell of a lot and explained lots of plot holes throughout my past videos. I hope you liked it. I'm the Theorizer. Subscribe. Hello, I'm the Theorizer, and I know I just uploaded another Coraline video a couple weeks ago, but this is a very important thing that I discovered in tandem with a viewer on Twitter. First, a quick analysis of evidence. If you aren't aware, Coraline, the animated film by the company Laika, is a movie that I've made so many videos on. It started with me looking at something I found bizarre, the well in the movie. It symbolically matches the portal between the two worlds, so I actually tried to connect them with logic and what the repercussions would be. This resulted in me going through the whole movie, dissecting the other mother's past, discussing how she may have been a human, and how there's possibly two cats trapped in one body, but both of them are not real cats. One of them is the spirit of YB's grandma's father, and the other one is either the son of the other mother or the spirit of the other world, an entity that deeply corrupted the Beldam, making her evil. So watch post them all. They're my most intricate videos, but right now, the evidence at hand. On Twitter, a viewer came to me with odd images. After I went in part 11 and analyzed all of the important scenes, frame by frame for evidence, finding suspicious stills, so did they. And they found something shocking. Twitter user at OllieH19 did a frame-by-frame analysis of the scene right before the one I analyzed of the tunnel collapsing. They analyzed the part where Coraline kicked the Beldam's face back down into her web. These frame-by-frame screenshots prove one thing for sure, that, like I've been saying, the Beldam's face is not a skull. It's always looked like either ceramic or, as the viewer suggested, cracked china, which is basically that fancy ceramic pottery. This is very interesting because it even further proves my theory that she's a disintegrating human. She's replaced her primary dexterous extremities with her metal prongs and needles that she had in the other world's sewing room with her. She replaced her eyes with some of her sewing buttons, and she replaced her rotting face with, yes, some of her plates and dishes. They show signs of having broken down over the several decades. Obviously, I mean, this idiotic witch tried drilling buttons through them, but when Coraline kicks the Beldam's face, it outright shatters in half before she wills it back together. So what I did then was I took the images and brightened them up to see if I could find what was behind her mask. And what I found is either the most horrifying discovery I have to date discovered on this channel, or it's a blatant red herring and just so happened to be the way I brightened the image. Either way, I'm ready to share this now. When you screenshot the film the second before Coraline kicks the Beldam in the face, you get a brilliant close-up of the Beldam. I couldn't find as HD pics as this person could capture, and when I brightened it up very specifically, I saw a small circular dot in the corner of the Beldam's hair. It could be part of her spine, so I brightened some more, and got this. A very distinct imprint amongst blackness. Very hard to find, and apparent with a second small circle just adjacent, like the eyes and facial pattern of a small animal we're familiar with. How horribly bizarre. Now, we know Mr. Lovat switched back to himself after being thrown at the Beldam, which is why the cat ripped out the Beldam's eyes, and then he ran back home, but Vermin, the possessing spirit, he vanished. Where did he go? Clearly he didn't go back to possessing the cat until the very end of the movie, so what happened to him here? Is he hiding with Mother Dearest? I was viciously intrigued by this, if it is in fact there, so I kept looking through the other frames. When Coraline kicks the Beldam, for a split frame, you can see yet another freaky thing crawl from the cracks of her face. Maybe if it was just one frame that had something attributable to the shape of a face in it, then I'd drop it, but now we have a second frame right after that shows a mysteriously brightened section with a small white angry-eyed dot crawling from her face mask. Horrifying looking. Now, all of this could be the evil spirit, or it could be nothing, but regardless, it's a terror to look at. But now, I have piles of explanations that tie together everything about the other world, the Beldam, and the cats. Referring back to part 11, I talked about how this other cat Vermin could be the Beldam's son. However, the only evidence I had for that was regarding the blue boy, who I later confirmed could not be her son. So what makes more sense at this point in time? Who is Vermin? Well, quite simply, he is the other world itself. The book is excellently in tune with this. It talks about the portal as a living entity, and by extension, the other world itself as a living entity. It talks about how it's far, far older than the Beldam, and this was what made me consider the Beldam being human and having entered it in the first place. So, if it's alive and it's older than the Beldam, what is the other world? Well, clearly we'd get to see who it is in the movie. It's Vermin, the other cat, the one who frequently goes to possess Mr. Lovat. It's what we see hiding with the Beldam, the beast that lured the Beldam into the other world for its own parasitic needs, the being that the Beldam harnessed into a portal, the cat she calls Vermin, the pesky, versatile, supernatural creature that was the reason the Beldam deteriorated to begin with. The other world sucks life out of those who enter it. Vermin. In a magical world where the Beldam can live forever by crushing the life out of people, why would she need to To begin with, if it's magical, because her life is being drained by the space around her. The Beldam cannot fully understand the cat. She cannot keep him out, because he is everywhere, as seen especially with the portals. He is the physical embodiment of the other-world spirit. The Beldam's replacement of her own body parts into a spider form makes her a better predator to feed the kitty. This is in part Vermin's doing, since he favors spiders, as we see in the fact that the portal, his actual throat, has cobwebs all throughout it. The sewing room is her only way out, her only bridge to Earth, and it is forever out of her reach. The Beldam isn't possessing Vermin. If anything, Vermin is possessing the Beldam. Vermin is the being that gets the doll to where it needs to go, not as a cat, but as an omnipotent and omnipresent entity. He doesn't take sides because all he needs is the Beldam. His possession of Mr. Lovat is sensible. After all, Mr. Lovat is the only person who would have died around the Pink Palace, and as we've said, he was brought back by the other world's seeping magic. He was brought back by Vermin so that Vermin could possess him and get close to the kids, so that Vermin could move around the real world too. The well is an esophageal passageway to the belly of a metaphysical beast, the other world itself. Vermin cannot leave the Pink Palace's environs as he is restricted to his massive extra-dimensional body, which leaves only 3 questions. What is Vermin, how old is he, and where did he come from? As pointed out on Twitter by user @Jellostun, the cat glares at the doll and knows it's evil. This would be because Mr. Lovat remembers his daughter bringing home a similar doll, but that's Mr. Lovat. Vermin, on the other hand, it's hard to find evidence of him existing in different forms many decades ago. Vermin is a being, alienated to us, a higher entity, something we'd perceive scientifically as an extra-dimensional alien, or something historical religions would perceive as a demon or the devil itself. A terrifying and sapient whole plane of existence, a parasitic land of soullessness that demands what it lacks: life. This plane of existence can warp time and space around the Pink Palace, creating all manner of portals and dilating time for those inside of his spatial plane, keeping the Beldam fed so he can be fed. She is a pointless and insignificant conduit of nutrients. She'll die without the kids because of the cat. And what would happen to Vermin should he fail to be fed? He'll lure in another person to become the next Beldam, and who better a fit than Coraline herself. So for those asking if it has a truly happy ending, no, it most certainly does not. And not because Coraline will be taken by the Beldam, no. The ending is horrific because the Beldam's dead, and because Coraline will become the next Beldam, being forced to drag in and murder little children for eternity as her body rots away without dying. Oh, well, I'm tired at the moment, but I'll make another part to this because I'm only clawing at the surface of this demonic feline. It's an alien because obviously it isn't human, though not a stereotypical alien, of course. Is it from space? I have no idea. Is it explained biblically? Probably, but I have no idea at the moment. I'll have to return again because this is possibly the biggest breakthrough I've ever made in a video. Until my very soon return to this, I'm the Theorizer. And so today, in what I hope will be the last time I hit this movie, I'm going to discuss the final theory I accidentally made when overcomplicating things for myself. Enjoy this Lovecraftian freak show.
You dare disobey your mother!
Hello, I'm the Theorizer, and happy pre-Halloween. We're on part 13. Yikes. Many of you have been telling me I've made too many Coraline videos, but you have to realize that the first 3 parts were a single theory, then the next 5 were all on one more theory. Same goes for parts 9, 10, and 11, so all in all, I've only made 3 or so major theories on this film. It just took a while to solve them, so I spread out the content. And for those wondering, the first 3 theories were on the well, the next 3 were theories on the Beldam, and the latter 3 were on the cat. Finally, with parts 12 and 13, we're solving the other world, and how we actually meet its character. All you need to know is that after making several videos trying to prove how the cat is possessed by 2 different souls, I finally realized that the cat, or at least one side of him, long story, is more powerful than the Beldam. In part 12, I finally realized that all of my theorizing was essentially dancing around one core concept, that the other world itself is alive. The books bring this up lots, and the Beldam hints towards it, and the world drains all who enter it. It is eating away at the Beldam, as we see with her deteriorated true state. The cat, or at least the side of him that doesn't care about Coraline, is this world. He's its personification. You guys were right when you commented on just how Lovecraftian this truly is. Even the Beldam, a 200-year-old seamstress who's experienced the majority of what we hear about in the movie, doesn't understand the world that she's in. This side of the cat, Vermin we shall call him, is a true neutral. He doesn't care about the Beldam. She is nothing more than the means to feeding him. She hates cats. She goes on and on about it. Understandable, since this otherworld spirit has possessed a cat. She hates it. She calls it vermin because she can't keep it out, because it's far more powerful than her. It's a parasite. The Beldam is living in a world that is completely parasitic, sucking away her life and forcing her to lure and kill innocent children against her own wishes. She'll die without the mess, she screams at the end, because something's killing her, slowly eating away at her own soul, the world around her. Vermin also seems to understand the other world and how it's a gravitational pocket dimension outside of space-time. Almost immediately after they traverse the other world, he explains it. And again, as mentioned last time, the Coraline books mention how the portal and world is an entity far older than the Beldam, and the portal is essentially implied to be its literal esophagus. The cat is the one who puts the doll where it needs to go, using its sheer omnipotence. The other world is a plane of existence, but it can think. It's conscious, it's smart, it's sapient. It's Vermin, it's the cat. So that's the core point of my last video, but at the end, I brought up the answer to a question nobody wanted to ask. Is Coraline safe? No, she's not, and here's why. The Beldam was very clearly an unwitting pawn. Who knows she's an unwitting pawn? She was lured into the other world and became the horror show we see today. She loves the kids and dramatically forces herself to kill them so that nobody will have to take on the even more terrifying role, being the kidnapper themselves. She is drastically and painstakingly sacrificing herself for eternity in order to save planet Earth from the other world. She desperately doesn't want to subject anyone else to the extremely unfortunate fate she lives through every single day. And she visibly does love the kids. The seamstress has only killed 3 children over the course of her holding the title of Beldam. She does it so that she doesn't die. She does it so that she can keep herself alive and the other world happily fed. Because if she doesn't, then another person will be forced to hold the title of Beldam, the hand that feeds the cat. The intermediary that kidnaps souls for themselves to absorb so the other world can spiritually feast upon the intermediary. So the ending of Coraline is as dramatic as it is because the Beldam is dead. During Coraline's escape from the seamstress is freaking out. If she dies, she knows that the next person who will hold the title of Beldam will be Coraline. The cat has taken quite a liking to her. Coraline has just freed the few souls that the other world had left to feed upon, and along with that, Coraline has also allowed the other world's current abductor to rot away. The seamstress flips out, knowing Coraline's next, and the horror will persist persist, with a new poor person becoming the one who kidnaps and devours children. The end of the movie pans out as we see the seamstress's face in the garden before zooming out to the cat, who stretches, stares at the camera, smiles, and disappears as it prepares to entrance its next beldam. This also makes perfect sense in regards to the well scene. The seamstress freaks out when Coraline drops the key down the well because the key goes directly to Vermin, not her. Notice how Vermin then stares at Coraline, cocks his head to the side, and smiles eerily as the clouds above them literally and physically part as Vermin instantly kills the beldam, along with all of the portals and keys and traps she's created, minus the well, as it's his body. Coraline is next. The next beldam. The second the key goes down the well, the other mother we all know and love stops banging on Coraline's wall because she is instantaneously devoured. So, then a question is remaining. Who was the beldam before the 1800s seamstress? Well, judging from the location, it was most likely some sort of First Nations woman who'd become known as a horrific magical monster of the night. Perhaps one of the real-life folklore stories I mentioned before that the beldam is based upon. The other world is a Lovecraftian entity that has produced a fairly impressive infinite loop of cycling death for its own consumption. Before the Native Americans of Oregon, I don't know who took the title because I don't know where it came from. The books are on this wavelength of thought as well. The best and closest understanding I can have is that it came from space, as its whole theme is hyperdimensionality, and the well is a vastly deep hole that seems to have been penetrated by something from, above. People have even gone to compare Coraline to the story of It, one of the most notable being YouTuber The Fangirl. However, I always questioned it in the sense regarding the beldam and Pennywise and such, since there's no real connection truly, but I mind-bogglingly must acknowledge the connection I see in regards to the Lovecraftian aspect shared between the beast beneath the town in both Coraline and It. There's no true conspiratorial connection between those two stories, but it goes to show just how much this kind of theme is regarded as brilliant. Recently-ish, the author of the original Coraline, Neil Gaiman, has, on his official Tumblr, intentionally remained vague with answering most of the questions about Coraline's lore. But he did, however, suggest that there's a good possibility that there are others like the seamstress out there, which, to me, would indicate that in the past, the other world has had previous entities supplying it with what it needs. Perhaps the cat has even created portals elsewhere around the planet. It's a sad, scary thought. Then again, Neil Gaiman has also mentioned watching a Coraline theory on YouTube at around the time when the only main lore one there was mine, going viral at that exact time, and he called it completely mad but fun. So I appreciate being called a nutty conspiracy theorist. It is my striving passion in apparent life. Anyways, that's that. It's the furthest I think I could go here or really in any other direction with this movie. But I keep surprising myself with these weekly tests of logical reasoning, so I have no idea what the future holds for these videos. But if you want more, rewatch my previous Coraline theories. According to my comments section, half the people are pointing out that the well looks like a portal. You guys do know that the entire basis of these theories, part literal frickin' 1, had that concept as its central premise? People do that constantly when they watch my theories, constantly. I'm at a fault partially for presenting them in my bizarre and confusing fashion, but like they'll watch my video, try to understand what exactly I've said, and then they'll come to this brilliant revelation, and they'll comment or make a video on it, without realizing that the revelation they've come to was actually just what I said in my video, and they managed to figure out what I was saying. But do you know what? I love doing this. Happy Halloween. Until next time, I'm the Theorizer. Boo!